Agent of F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E. Ingobnito by Lark Sabre. Read by Lark Sabre. Chapter 29. Back to Little Whiffley again. For Hunter, the next quarter of an hour or so, though it seemed to last a lot longer in worm time, was an eyelid-coloured panorama of featureless dark peach, and then, once he was in the night air, the dark peach became an indigo dungeon of the same sensory deprivation. He experienced a bracing chill sensation across his new body, little knowing Rough and Tuft had yeeted him right over the fence, and then suddenly felt bruised all along its long, squidgy, boneless expanse as he hit the ground, though he was equally oblivious to this, the flip side of gravity, too. But other than that, Hunter was simply killing time within his boring worm body, impatient to become a human masquerading as a goblin again. He also felt rather hard done by at this turn of events, it had to be said. When his human senses returned, along with his arms, legs, $3.99 mask, and grass-stained trousers, Hunter found himself in the garden next to Old Man Horrocks's, the one vacated by the F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E. what seemed like an age ago. Clothes disappeared into some mystical storage locker when fairy magic transmogrified the wearer, and then returned when the spell wore off, which was a relief, as Hunter didn't much fancy seeing Lefty, John Gobby, and Lucky in their birthday suits, or having the insult of losing his disguise added to the injury of vermification. Though he reckoned that losing his disguise might well turn out to be an injury too, if the goblins discovered Joe Pumpkins was a plant from the start, one who had assisted in the thwarting of this last crucial fairy dust heist, the heist that could fuel the Gobverter enough to reach critical mass and liberate little Whifflians from their banishment into the sewers. Less merciful than returning to his human self fully clothed, however, was the sight that presented him upon doing so. He had been the first to revert back to his true form, as Agent Wildflower had cast the least potent transformation spell on Hunter. She felt quite guilty at Hunter being caught up in the counter-offensive. Well, as guilty as she was capable of feeling, what with her easy-come, easy-go attitude, born of a sorceress's arrogance. This meant Hunter got to view what happened when spells wore off gradually, instead of being proactively reversed, and he really rather wished he hadn't. It was the stuff of nightmares. Lefty, John, Gobby, and Lucky were all slowly morphing back into goblins, and it was like watching a time-lapse video of skinny, pale, grink tadpoles transform into goblin-faced frogs. Weedy vestigial limbs started growing out of the earthworm bodies, whilst the tail end of the worms slowly retracted and reduced, being sucked up like a piece of slow-motion spaghetti into what would become a goblin's butt. The tip of each worm's head end became more bulbous and angular, a proto-nose around which other watery facial features began to emerge from the worm skin before swelling like jelly and solidifying. The worm colour of the respective worms darkened to brown, grey-green, and greeny-grey. Towards the end of the spell's undoing, the goblins' clothes began to regarb their bodies, though first the tunics, John Gobby and Lucky's rakish gnome hats, and Lefty's leather skull cap, the knapsacks and leg wrappings had the appearance of apparitions or very fine cobwebs, strangely beautiful and translucent previews of the attire they were to become, twinkling with the golden pixelation of fairy dust, teleported back from the mystic storage locker whence they had been stored. Hunter tried to put the thought out of his mind that he had also been the victim of this mostly repulsive remorphing. "Damn no good two-bit, flouncy flapper, magic mooklin, cheating finger bells!" raged Lefty now he was fully goblin again. "They got the jump on us." Yeah, boss. Somehow they sent our Bugsy's gaga, and we were sitting quack rats," said Lucky, stating the obvious. "Well, tell me something I don't know, you mooklin," yelled Lefty in frustration, and cuffed Lucky rather sharply around the back of the head, knocking his recently reconstituted rakish gnome hat clean off. "They was waiting for us. We was like wool rats to the slaughter," remarked John Gobby, shaking his head bitterly, his bat ears making a swishing sound as he did so. It seemed every non-folklore creature with 2 legs or more was an extended branch of the order Rodentia to a goblin. "Cheer up, lads. At least we're not worms anymore," chipped in Hunter. The goblins eyed Hunter scornfully. Unlike the newbie, Hunter/Joe Pumpkins, the Mobilino veterans knew Boss Brasco brooked no failure. They'd seen for themselves gobsters thrown into stormwater overflows wearing concrete winkle pickers. In actuality, just hardened fatberg winkle pickers, but concrete sounded cooler. The result was the same, though. Blub, blub, blub. There was other gruesome gobster gossip that sometimes Boss Brasco sent gobsters who bungled jobs to gator sailors like Sharona to sate the prehistoric munchies of their living reptilian sewer craft. He wasn't the boss for nothing. "Is that what we was, earthworms?" replied Lefty. "Now's I know why I couldn't see or hear nothing. And as for that itch I had on the tip of my schnozola, forget about it. Look, Joey, I know you're trying to lighten the mood, but when the boss finds out the heist's been a bust, we's gonna wish we were still earthworms." The walk back across the row of gardens was conducted in downhearted and sullen silence. The Mobolinos couldn't be bothered to be particularly stealthy anymore, though low spirits are a natural noise reducer anyway. Lucky didn't even seem anxious about bumping into Scolty again. Perhaps Boss Brasco's ire was more fearsome than the claws of a scraggy ginger tiger. The morose foursome, even Hunter felt downcast by contagion, and he had actively sabotaged the heist, arrived at the manhole on Hoffer Road, and slipped through the waiting gap of the still partially slid open cover. At this time of night, no one had alerted any human workmen that someone or something had been unsealing the entrances to the Venice of excrement slopping along in fetid streams beneath our towns and villages. Out of sight, out of mind. Or should that be out of butt, out of mind? "What's the time, boss?" asked John Gobby of the long-faced Lefty. Lefty twitched his left ear, the one that didn't have the knuckle-duster-shaped bite mark taken out of the top of the pinner, and with uncanny, unerring accuracy pinpointed that 3,725 drips had elapsed since they'd parted ways with Sharona and Lincoln. "We're late. Sharona's gonna sprain our sprouts too. I ain't looking forward to breaking that sweet little Gooma's heart when I gotta tell her poor old Lincoln ain't getting his slice of the River Braddock," said Lefty ruefully. At that moment, the goblin's Bogsies flickered somewhat feebly aglow. Dr. Nutkenstein's anti-Bogsy transmitter must be out of range. Perhaps it needed recalibrating. Whatever, it had performed admirably on the night and averted a goblin takeover, as had the little receiver in Hunter's own borrowed Bogsy. The Bogsies had come back online with perfect timing, though. Hunter hadn't much fancied stumbling upon the sewer ledges in the pitch darkness, or tripping headfirst into one of these malodorous underground canals where number ones and number twos freely mingled. Like they say, it's not the fall, it's the landing that counts. "Old Frank Costello must be smiling down on us like the angel Gabriel, boys. Our Bugs is back in the land of the living. Least we can see he's beyond our hooters now, though I reckon I could still sniff my way back to Little Whiffley if I had to. Forget about it. I still got it," perked up Lefty in response to the Bogsies reactivating, at least in part. Hunter didn't have a Scooby who old Frank Costello was, but he inferred he was some long-departed gobster of renown. The boys shared in the Godber's relief, however, that the Bogsies were providing some illumination again, though he knew the spirit of old Frank Costello or the angel Gabriel weren't responsible. The partners in crime, and the undercover undoer of their crimes, started the precarious trudge along the sludge-encrusted sewer ledges to rendezvous with their gateway driver, Sharona. That is, if she was still waiting. Hunter wasn't sure as to why he was still tagging along. "Look, Left, I might go catch an alligator back to the big city, so I'll wait for the next one when you three leave with Sharona, if that's gabish, boss. There's not much point in me hanging around. I'm sorry tonight didn't pan out, but there's not a lot we can do about those fairies, eh? They're just too smart for us. That F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E must have some pretty dashing and courageous agents." "That's not how it works, I'm afraid, kid," replied Lefty sternly, his voice as cold as a goblet of bog water left out overnight in the middle of Braddock's meadow with only the November moonlight to warm it. "When you're a Mobolino, you gotta answer to the boss when a job goes caca. That means yous, and that means me, capiche? You wouldn't want John Garby Lucky and old Lefty to think you're bailing out on us, would you, Joey? That yous turned clock rat? Don't forget I vouched for you, Joey. I don't want the boss thinking I vouched for no yellow gobbo who can't take what he's got coming." "What wanting will-o'-the-wisps," thought Hunter, assessing the sitch with an undercover agent zippy thinking. "I didn't much like Lefty's tone then. Clock rat must mean chicken, but I don't see how Boss Brasco could accuse me of being a yellow gobbo when he's literally a yellow goblin. I better face the music along with the others, though, or it'll make them majorly sus. And they're already not very chipper wise gobs at the moment. Levitating leprechauns. I wish F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E would hurry up and get me out of here. Oh yeah, Lefty, I get that. No disrespect, boss. I was just thinking of my girlfriend back at the abandoned power station. Ain't no time for dames, Joey, Lefty admonished him, but with a hint of a wry smirk. Get this Ryan Goblin wannabe, eh, boys? He's a real ladies' cub. Yeah, agreed John Gobby and Lucky in unison, not a glimmer of anything remotely resembling an upside-down frown on their faces, wry or otherwise. Up ahead stood the by now instantly recognizable silhouette of Sharona, the cowed, water-walking gator helmswoman of the Seven Seas, or rather the Seven Sewers. Use late, Lefty. I want to get home and get out of my lime green war paint. And Lincoln's belly's beefing like a Godzilla cabone, she snapped. Can it, Sharona, will you? Snapped back Lefty, with higher key snappiness, far removed from his usual chivalrous patter with Sharona. Lincoln growled, and the whole tunnel rumbled, but Sharona hushed him with a combo of taps just behind his green brows, like she was sending a Morse code message to his brain with her feet. Yeah, okay, Lefty, I was just saying, that's all. I wasn't spreading your sprouts, honest, replied Sharona meekly. I'm real sorry for giving you both powers, Sharona. That was uncalled for. It's just the job tonight was a bust, and I've got to tell the boss. He's going to give me a serious workout, and that's if I'm lucky. Now, you're Lefty, I'm Lucky, piped up Lucky, only catching the end of the convo as he himself trepidatiously boarded the intimidating alligator. Lucky was not the biggest animal lover at this moment in time. I was yakking to Sharona, you mooklin. If I wind up gobble gabagool for old Lincoln, you're coming with me. Lefty upbraided his grey-green underling and made a motion to slap Lucky around the back of the head again. But Lucky had already scampered halfway down the alligator's armoured spine, out of Lefty's reach. Sharona grinned soppily at Hunter like a simpering Cheshire cat, pouting her neon lime green lips. Hunter nodded sheepishly, and also hurried down Lincoln's back to sit in defeated silence with the rest of Lefty's crew for the entirety of the voyage back to Little Whiffley, listening to the steady beat of the ubiquitous drips, the sewer equivalent of a clock's tick. The constant plip-plop, plip-plop, plip-plop prompted in Hunter the realization that, no matter how late it was when he finally got home, he really, really wanted it to still be bath time, after all this gadding about in gardens and sewers, not to mention literally being a worm, with all the attendant sliminess that had entailed. Where are you, Agent Stella Wildflower? I've done my part, now do yours, and rescue me.